Joining me now from Capitol Hill is one of them, California Congresswoman Jackie Speier, a Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congresswoman, always a pleasure. Welcome back.
Thank you, Brooke.
I want to begin with, Steve Bannon. You heard from Mr. Bannon yesterday. He kept citing executive privilege so many times that your committee, with a Republican chair, had to subpoena him to compel him to answer. What was it that he was refusing to answer?
So it wasn't him as much as it was his attorney, who was in consultation with the White House General Counsel, who was calling the shots, frankly. It was the White House who was playing a dance, frankly, to try and invoke executive privilege without invoking it. So we went through a number of gyrations. It took many hours to negotiate a modest change. We are going to have to call Mr. Bannon back because he was unable to answer any questions about the transition or his term of strategist within the White House from January 20th to when he was nominated.
So just so I'm clear, during the questioning, the Bannon attorney was communicating with the White House during the questions.
Well, no, not actually during the questions. Before he came to testify, and then we took a recess, and then he communicated with the White House during that recess to get his instructions as to what Mr. Bannon was going to be able to respond to and what he wasn't going to be able to respond to. So
then on the instructions, do you feel like the White House forced the lawyer and then ultimately Steve Bannon to keep quiet?
Oh, I think there's no question about that. I think Adam Schiff, our ranking member, referred to it as a gag order imposed by the White House, and for all intents and purposes, that's what it was. Now, the extent to which the White House continues to do that with other personnel, be it Mr. Dearden or be it Hope Hicks, we'll have a challenge before us because the executive privilege can only be invoked when there is a national security issue or when it is in the best interest of the public to keep something private. And those presidents who have tried to invoke this privilege in the past, when it's gone to court, they have failed. Clinton, Obama. So I think this is just a stall tactic by the president.
So what did he say? What did he say of substance that was news to you?
Well, of course, I'm not at liberty to tell you what he said of substance because these are classified or unclassified but confidential interviews. But I can tell you that there was some information that was new to us that we had not heard before. But again, it was only information that we were able to glean during the campaign and not anything during the transition or once the president took office.
Okay. What do you think of Steve Bannon striking this deal with a special prosecutor to avoid testifying in front of a grand jury?
Well, I think that he's going to do what's in his best interest, as would any witness, and I think in the end he will comply with the subpoena or he will negotiate an interview independent of the subpoena.
Let me move on and let's talk about this. Friday is a big day, the looming government shutdown. I know that you voted, Congresswoman Speier, for a continuing resolution back in early December, but then voted against the last one in late December. How will you vote now?
I will vote no on this continuing resolution if it's not a clean CR. If it's a clean CR, I will certainly vote for it. But the Republicans are, trying to, play games, frankly, with shutting down the government. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to see the government shut down, so a clean CR makes sense. But
what about CHIP, and what about those 9 million children in this country and how they've thrown that in? And so if you would be voting no, you'd be voting no to those 9 million kids as well. Are you willing to do that?
So it's not just the 9 million kids. They are excluding all of the qualified clinics, which is a huge component of the health care that these children receive. And so it's not comprehensive in terms of fixing CHIP. And the efforts to unwind the Affordable Care Act are very transparent. I mean, getting rid of all of the funding sources so there will be no longer any kind of subsidy to low-income people who who are paying for their insurance but have a subsidy under the Affordable Care Act. It's an effort to kill the Affordable Care Act by 1,000 cuts.
Understand what you're saying, and a lot of people listening would absolutely agree with you. But just so I'm clear, since you wouldn't be getting all that you wish for, you would be willing to shut the government down or be one vote toward shutting the government down because of it.
So I don't think the government will be shut down. I don't think they have the votes in the House for what they're proposing, and certainly there aren't the votes in the Senate. So neither the House nor the Senate really wants to shut government down. So this little dance will probably turn into a clean CR that will continue the government's operations for another month.
Okay. We'll have this conversation then. Lastly, but so importantly, Congresswoman, your sexual harassment legislation is being unveiled today. This is a big day for you. You know, you had mentioned recently that there were at least two current lawmakers accused of these things. Can you share any sort of update on them, and are they still walking those hallowed halls of Congress?
Well, I can tell you that one of them still is. Again, there was a settlement under the old rules that presently exist that created a settlement. The victim has declined to come forward, and I have said from the outset that I was going to protect the victims. I'm not so interested in the harasser, certainly, but I don't want the victim to be harmed any further than they already have been. But moving forward, the bill that will be dropped today is a bipartisan measure. I'm thrilled to be introducing it along with the chair of the committee, Greg Harper, and Bradley Byrne. And it's a measure that includes all of the elements of the Me Too legislation that I originally introduced, plus a little bit more. So we have just a very strong piece of legislation that is going to protect staff members on Capitol Hill forevermore. And it will also be a model, I think, that hopefully the private sector will look at.
Hopefully. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, thank you.